Welcome back to the Blue North. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Democrats in this 2020 election. And I'm going to point out a few things that I've noticed, and I'm going to talk about them. So, I have my highlights here, and let's get right to it. They're systematically attacking the United States, and I'd like to pinpoint that attack and how they're doing it. So, the first thing they're doing is they're going after speech. Now, they're deeming so many different parts of what we say as racist. Now, they're not perceived by the masses to be that, but once the mainstream media tells you that that phrase, that comment, that word is racist, then you have a fight on your hands. Now, there are some people that are still standing up and saying, you know what? I'm not racist. This isn't a racist thing. I'm not being racist. No, I'm not going to give in to that. This is just simply an old saying, and I'm using it. It's not racist. I mean nothing by it. And really, the left is finding things like when Donald Trump came up with "Make America Great Again." Well, Ronald Reagan used that, so it wasn't racist back when he used it. But the Democrats would have you believe, and the mainstream media, that, and this was one of the things that they said was "Make America White Again." It had nothing to do with that. But once you heard it, once you've been told that enough times, now just even the mention of mega sends some people like reeling because they say, "Oh, it's so racist." It's not. It just make America great again. It has nothing to do with the skin color of anyone. But right now, under attack is your freedom of speech. So if you were to say that all lives matter, a woman lost her life. A young woman with a small child was shot and killed by a Black Lives Matter protester because she uttered the words, "All lives matter." And this was deemed to be so bad. When you think that everybody's life is is important and all life matters, it isn't a bad thing. It isn't a racist. It isn't a horrible thing. You simply believe that all lives matter. However, this woman, just by uttering that sentence, cost her her life. And her child is now motherless because someone believes that that is a horrible thing to say. Obviously, that person doesn't believe that all lives matter or that life matters in general, because nobody should take someone else's life. Now, George Floyd died, and he shouldn't have died, and the way he died was horrendous. But when you're a protester protesting George Floyd's life being taken away, but yet you're willing to take someone else's just because of something they said, you're no better. You're absolutely no better than the officer that took George Floyd's life. It's exactly the same. You can't defend killing someone over uttering the words "all lives matter." But we've been programmed to believe that words can be so hurtful. And words can be, but saying all life matters is not those words. The word grandfathered in, or the grandfather clause. Anybody that knows this comment, heard this comment or this statement or this old utterance, it has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with it. It just means that you have done something long enough and you are grandfathered in because you've done it for so long. So new laws shouldn't apply to you. That's what it means. That's what everybody believes. That's what everybody uses that term. But now all of a sudden, somebody's looked up, uh, I guess, the definition of this term from way back and has now deemed it a racist comment. Syrup. We can't use Aunt Jemima syrup anymore. Most people know it as Aunt Jemima syrup. It's not a bad thing. Nobody made fun of the syrup. Nobody called it a derogatory term. It was Aunt Jemima syrup. It was everybody's Aunt Jemima. The logos, like the Washington Redskins, it was definitely a little bit insensitive on the term Redskins. But when you get to the Braves, you're using it, or the Chiefs. You're using that because you want to sound powerful. You want to sound important. You want to sound like you're fearful, like you should be feared. These were warriors. They were honored. To say that you can't use the word chief, that it's racist, you should be, everybody is, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, you're proud of it. You wear it with pride. The Redskins, I can see it, and they've acknowledged that, and they're changing it, and they're going to come up with a better term, but hopefully they still honor the person that they were trying to in the first place. But these actions are designed to silence facts. They want to silence people on the right so that you have no resistance to what the left is trying to do. By using these tactics, they're hoping to silence any pushback, anyone with knowledge or even a resistance to what's going on around you. It's like pro athletes that are standing when they're the only one standing in the whole line and the whole team is taking a knee. And one guy is standing and saying, I only bow down to the Lord Jesus Christ. That is a powerful moment. That is a powerful moment for that one person saying, no, I will not do this. And we have to have these strong individuals. We need them. Virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is something that the left is using, and they're trying to change the perception of the left. So they're taking a knee. Now, the picture of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and a bunch of Democrats with a scarf around their neck kneeling in the House or the Senate, this is great. It's a powerful, powerful picture, but it's an empty picture because they don't even know George Floyd's name. Neither Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, when they were asked about what was going on or whatever, neither of them could mention George Floyd's name. They called him George Taylor. They called him Taylor something. And they couldn't get his name right. So if you are so moved to take a picture on one knee, saying, yet we're going to do something that this family will remember and honor the name of this man, don't you think you should know the name of that man? So the Democrats were just virtue signaling with this picture. They didn't even put enough effort in to anything outside of that picture to even remember the man's name. So they want to put the history of the Democrat Party onto the Republican Party. They keep saying that the Republicans were the KKK supporters back in the day, and that somewhere along the lines, the Republicans and the Democrats have changed lines. They haven't, because Robert Byrd was a KKK Grand Wizard, or he was a KKK member anyways, for years. And only at the end of his life did he change and become someone that was against the KKK movement. But he spent his whole life, right up to the very end of his life, he was pretty much a KKK supporter. So how is it that the Republicans are KKK supporters if they had one of their own in the Senate? They call for the defund the police. They're calling for the defunding of the police departments, and we're watching the crime rate skyrocket in those cities like Seattle and New York and Chicago, where they're trying to be progressive and they're trying to say that they're so, they're virtue signaling to say that we are for the defunding the police. Well, you're making your cities a mockery. You're making your cities absolutely unsafe for everybody to be in. So how is it helping? It's an empty virtue signal. Crime rate is staggering in these cities. Nicole Hannah-Jones is a CNN rep. Nicole Hannah-Jones. And she's saying that if you lose property, if somebody destroys your property and it can be replaced, that's not violence. It isn't violence. So if somebody comes, like anything could be replaced, right? Anything but life. So if you come and you have your house burnt down, Nicole Hannah-Jones will have you believe that if a protester burnt your house down, that isn't violent. That isn't a violent act because it can be replaced. So therefore, it's a peaceful protest because we can't call it violence because it can be replaced. Your car being burned, your car being, stolen and destroyed, it can be replaced. So that's not a violent act. Somebody carjacking your car is not a violent act. So what they do like to do is they like to put that on someone else. Like we've seen that with the homeowner when him and his wife were out in front of their home after the rioters broke their gate and came onto their property. They were going to loot. They were going to destroy their guy's property, and he wouldn't allow it. And him and his wife were outside with guns. Now, the Attorney General charged that couple, saying that they had no business pointing weapons at peaceful protesters. Meanwhile, they knocked the gate right off the fence. They knocked the gate. They destroyed the fence and gate to get in. So what were they going to do when they got in? They weren't going to just stand there and chant and shout at the homeowner. So if he wouldn't have been outside with a gun pointing it there, saying, "Okay, you're not coming in my property. I will defend myself." So the Attorney General charged, or at least the city prosecutor charged the couple, which the governor dropped the charges, saying this is ridiculous. So the left trying to change what we perceive to be right and what we perceive to be wrong. They call violent riots and looting peaceful protesters, and anybody that stands in their way are the bad guys. You see how that's happening? What they're trying to do is they're trying to change the perception of right and wrong. You shouldn't be out looting and rioting and destroying. We've seen protesters shooting. There was an incident where there was a white SUV stopped by a bunch of protesters, and someone standing off to the left was shooting in the passenger side window. Thankfully, nobody was killed, but he was shooting. For what? The car was stopped. Now that's deemed not violent by the left. Meanwhile, the SUV driver had no other option. Once shots started firing into his vehicle, he took off. Didn't care if anyone was in front of it or not. He needed to get out of there for the safety of himself and everybody else in the vehicle. But yet the left want to deem him to be the bad guy. So the same right now, we had a protester not too long ago who a Jeep was speeding through a protesting area, trying to get through it, trying to get away, just trying to get to safety. And a guy fired 2 rounds trying to hit the Jeep. Well, you shouldn't. He wasn't trying to run anybody over. He was trying to get to safety. But he fired his gun into the crowd. He hit one person, I believe, in the chest and one person in the temple. Now he's being charged, thankfully, because the police department is saying this is the most reckless thing they have ever seen. Someone without control of their weapon and without proper knowledge of how to use a firearm at a protest, firing rapidly into a crowd. Well, you're lucky only 2 people got hurt. Nobody got killed. So we're seeing lies from the left. This is their big thing, is misinformation. So Chris Cuomo building his home, saying that he was in the basement of his old home and that he was in isolation with COVID-19 and he couldn't get around and he couldn't do anything. He hasn't seen his family. Meanwhile, across town at the new build, he's there with his wife, his kids, and the builders. So he's putting a lot of people in danger with himself being there. And yet it seems funny when he goes back to his little basement apartment sort of thing where he's, riding out this COVID-19. He seems to be saying he hasn't seen anybody. I haven't been around my family. And then he's going to have the big reveal where he goes back up to his family. And he did all that. Meanwhile, he admitted to getting into this little bit of a spat with a guy riding his bike past the end of his place where he yelled out, "Hey, I thought you were at home in your basement. Here you are with your family, workers, everything. You've got COVID. You should be in the basement." So we're not getting the true story from the Cuomos, either one of them. The myth that crime is on an increase. Jerry Nadler said that that's a myth, that crime is not on an increase. Well, of course it is. Every city that is defunding the police is seeing this right across the board. So how is it a myth? It's a lie that Nadler's telling you because they don't want you to believe that it's not working. The Russian collusion, the Mueller report, the whole thing was a lie. Even Obama knew before he left office. This was an attempt to stall or to trip up the Trump presidency before it even happened. And they went with it. And Adam Schiff kept going on TV saying that he has read the evidence. The evidence is plain and it's clear that the obstruction is there, that the collusion is there. And then meanwhile, we're finding out now there's papers that said that they knew before even Obama left office that there was no collusion. So we've been lied to all along for 2.5 years. General Flynn, judge, refuses to drop the case against General Flynn, even though he's been ordered to. He still won't do it. Why? He wants to keep it alive. He wants to keep that lie alive that General Flynn did something wrong because it reflects poorly on Trump. I've already talked about the Missouri House owners with their weapons being charged. Thankfully, the charges have been dropped by someone higher than the prosecutor. But there's an attack on the nuclear family. That's the big thing here. They're attacking the values and the morals of the nuclear family. Christianity is majorly under attack right now. Not allowed to go to church, but you see that at John Lewis's funeral, they sat arm in arm. A lot of times they didn't even have masks on. But we're not allowed to go to our churches, and we're not allowed to sing and celebrate. But I don't understand how you can justify the two. If a Democrat dies, you can pack a church. If you want to go and praise your Lord and Savior, you can't do that. That's just uncalled for. Late-term abortion, something that Christians believe is as wrong. And I mean, you don't even have to be a Christian to believe that. There should be a cutoff, right? You should think that on the day in New York, if you're pregnant and you are in labor and you are giving birth that day, you can still change your mind and abort the baby. That, to me, is wrong. If you've waited that long, then somebody else that wants a child, if you don't want the child at that point, it's far too long. You've waited far too long. It's too late. The baby's coming out that day. You do no longer have the ability to say, you know what? No, I changed my mind. Church itself is being attacked. The ability to gather, freedom of speech is being attacked. I've already talked on this. I've already hit on words that they're trying to keep us from using. But it is if you can attack someone's freedom of speech, if you can silence or limit what they can say, and if you can deem the things that you know your opponents are going to use against you as racist and silence those attacks or those defense mechanisms, if you can silence those, you've really accomplished something. The racist fear. This is how they're doing it. So they're deeming food racist with like syrup. Their cancel culture is in high gear, in overdrive, trying to silence the support for the right wing. So if a CEO comes out for Goya beans, he said he supported the President of the United States. In and itself, that's a great statement because you are showing respect and admiration for the President of the United States. Even though the mainstream media and the left have tried to destroy everything about this man, but yet someone says that they support him, well, now you can't even buy those beans. No, you have to boycott those beans. Everybody that works for that company, everything about that company has to be destroyed because we don't want support for Donald Trump. Like, it's just ridiculous. Monuments being destroyed. Protesters are so naive, they don't even know what they're doing. They're trying to take down stuff like a statue of Abraham Lincoln that was bought and paid for by emancipated slaves. The first $5 that one woman made as a freed slave, she gave to this monument so that there would be something there for her to look at and have it signals her freedom. But now in 2020, we've decided that that has to go. That cannot stand because somehow that bothers someone. In their naive state of mind, that has to be destroyed. So the mainstream media is using uninformed people to spread misinformation, and hopefully it'll work to silence the right from having any kind of say or pushback. So what they're doing is they're spreading a platform of fear. So at work, you're not allowed to say a lot of things anymore, a lot of different places, because they have deemed this offensive. Now, the left can say whatever they want to start the conversation, and they'll do it on purpose to get somebody on the right to just say something that contradicts what the left is saying. And then they go right to HR and have the person either suspended or fired, or it's a really sad state that that's what you would do to a coworker. I've had something happen in my hometown where one of the people that works with my wife has said to a friend of mine, not knowing that it's a friend of mine, that my wife should be fired because she doesn't support the Liberal Party and that she supports the Conservative Party, so she shouldn't be allowed to work at the school board because the school board should only support the Liberals. Have we become that? That's what we've become in 2020? Intolerant to the point where if we're not all supporting the same political party, we can't work together? I'm dumbfounded by some of the things that go on just in my own city. So what they're hoping for with this misinformation and these bickerings and these little fights at the water, the water cooler and whatever, they're hoping that people are just so tired of Donald Trump and the fighting and the bickering that they're willing to try Joe Biden just to silence the ones that they know. They're not fooling anybody. Everybody knows that the mainstream media and the Democrats are the ones behind all of this uncivilness. But they're just so tired of it because they know that they're not going to change. If you ask anybody, they'll admit to it. They'll admit eventually that they know that it's not coming from the right, that it's coming from the left, all of these antics. But they know that it's not going to change. They know that it isn't something that is going to go away. So the tired of fighting is because they know that it's just that spoiled brat that's not going to stop crying in the grocery store till he gets the cookies. So just give him the cookies so that we can all shop in silence. Is what that's the moment that we're having right now in 2020. Just a lot of people are willing to vote for Joe Biden just because they know that the Democrats are behind all this crap and they just want it to go away because it's tiring. Uncivil discourse between everybody. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping to create this fear of being able to speak your mind so that one side is the only one that's getting being allowed to voice their opinion. There lies about racist and Russia and look at Nick Sandmann. Nick Sandmann just sued CNN and settled out of court, and then he sued Washington Post because both of them went after him as the bad guy, even though the video clearly showcases that he was the only adult that day on the Capitol. A constant Senate attack of Republicans. Even Attorney General Barr just went there to be berated by the Democrats in on the the Judicial Committee, and they never even allowed him to speak. They basically accused him of everything under the sun, but reclaimed their time before he was allowed to answer, so that they basically silenced him. They were allowed to do this, hoping that the voters would watch them berate him and put him down and accuse him and lie about him and never give him an opportunity even to defend himself once. And when he did try, when he got frustrated, they accused him of being disrespectful. Biden gets a pass on Tara Reade. When was the last time we heard about his sexual allegation? No, they dropped it. It just went away because they're just so busy trying to do all of this other stuff that they made all these other distractions that Tara Reade has gone away. Biden gets a pass on the Clintons going to the Epstein Island. So did the Clintons. The Clintons are getting a pass on Bill Clinton going to Epstein Island. Everybody knows what was going on there. And yet, with Bill Clinton going, nobody wants to ask the Democrat candidate about another fellow Democrat. Seems a little weird. But the mainstream media it encourages Biden to not have a debate. How do we not have a presidential debate? How do you not have at least one presidential debate? They're encouraging him to avoid this with all cost because they know what's going to happen. He's going to fail. So how is it that they're working so hard for all these underhanded things, and yet that's the man that we should have in the White House? Well, they're pushing pretty hard for a mail-in ballot. We saw Obama talk about it even as he was trying to eulogize John Lewis. He took time to campaign, trashed Trump, and plug ballots, mail-in ballots at John Lewis's funeral. New York just had a congressional vote in June, and here it is August, and we still don't know who won because it was such a disaster. But yet we're going to have a nationwide vote of mail-in. I read a funny little joke on Instagram where this young man was saying that his grandfather, I just found out my grandfather is voting Democrat in this year's election. Now, he is a lifelong Republican, but he's voting Democrat this year, and it saddens me. He goes, because if he was still alive, he would be furious. And that's what's going to happen. We're going to see a lot of people that are deceased that are voting, and we're going to see fraud. And we've already had numerous cases where people have been caught and charged for voter fraud, all on the Democrat side. The crime rate is something that should just be mentioned here at the end. It is staggering. We are witnessing weak Democrat governors and mayors allow their cities and their states to be overwhelmed. We see California with their illegals, with their sanctuary cities and sanctuary state. They're out of control. They want to take their prisoners and put them back on the street. They want to empty their prisons, and they want to fill their streets with illegals. Now, if you look at San Francisco, there's tent cities, and people are all over the streets where they have to be moved, and hazmat-clad people have to come in and clean the human feces off the floor or off the road. They're not bringing these people in and helping them. They're simply bringing them in and saying, look, we're being progressive. But they're not doing anything. It's just an empty virtue signal, like I started this speech off with. Well, we're seeing a lot of really horrible things coming from the Democrats. You have to be very, very careful what you do with your vote in this election. I don't think that it's ever been more important to inform yourself of what both sides stand for, what they're offering. The Democrats are offering defund the police, weaken the safety of your cities. They're standing on all kinds of weak values where we are turning on our morals and our values that built the United States to be one of the greatest countries in the world. You have to read up. You'll have to stay informed, because being informed is the absolute fix to all of these things that I have just said today, all of these points. Now, the Democrats hate someone that's informed. So all of these things are put in place to try to silence the person that is informed. Don't be silenced. Hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned as I follow along on more of this as we get closer to the election, and get yourself informed. I'm not going to tell you what websites to go to do that. Maybe read both sides. That's the best way to do it. Read CNN, read Fox News, read Breitbart, read all of the other ones. Read as many as you can. Read the same story on as many different websites as you can, and form your own opinion on it. Don't be told what your opinion is. Form your own opinion. Stay tuned for more podcasts on the Blue North.